Okay, welcome to my YouTube channel. With Mimi and with my special guest today. Even she is my very first guest in my YouTube channel. Oh. We're gonna have like virtual chit chat reunion, and then the second one we would like to discuss about. I think this is one of the quite important topics, especially for those who are concerned about mental health. As me, I still learn a lot as a counseling practitioner. I think it's still rarely people aware about this concern, especially for those who have at work. Especially because especially is inspiring for me. First, she's a lecturer, she's educator, she's a leader in her group, and then she's a mental health survivor.
My name is Stephanie Lapoidovin. I am Australian, but I currently live in the UK. So I am, what am I, 35? Well, go full introduction properly. I do go by she, her. They is also appropriate. One thing I do with my students when I write feedback is I always try to use neutral they, them pronouns so that they get used to hearing it as well and I get practice. And yeah, so I live in the UK. I moved here, which is about 5 years ago. I trained in Australia after many years of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life as a furniture maker. I completed a trade apprenticeship and I became qualified. I then moved over here where the appreciation of like furniture and handmade things and actually paying for it was more appreciated here. Before my apprenticeship, I went to university and studied furniture design, and I was generally better at teaching the other students what the teacher actually meant or supporting them in doing it. I got the job, and so as of the 4th of January, it's been officially 3 years that I have been a lecturer. I'm also, team lead, curriculum lead for my area. So I cover about, depending on the time of the year, between 150 and 200 students that I kind of monitor and then teach my set classes as well. So, yeah.
Wait, all right. You are lecturer, right? The first job that you are, you taught the student. You also mental health survivor means that you mentioned before you have the HD, which means attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And the second one is autism. So, what the first time? Do you still remember when the first time you aware about it? Okay, what's the story look like? Yeah.
Yeah. So it actually ties into my exchange. So when I was an exchange student, I had the mother and the father in the host family, and I had a brother and a sister. And the host brother was 10 or 11 years old. And he had what was described to be as PDD-NOS. And I'm like, what? So he was autistic. The way that they described, it was my first interaction with anyone who was autistic. So it was described to me that autism, you had your 3 areas of social skills and communication, intellect and motor skills. That's how they described it to me at that time, the host parents. And they said his motor skills were fine, but his communication and his social skills were lacking and his intelligence was really high. So I was like, okay. So he had like a really strict schedule. He really struggled to talk to me. He had a really strict like food relationship and all of these types of things. So I was already going into that situation being really open and just accepting people for who they were. And I'm like, okay, if he needs that, that's what we do. Whereas a lot of people don't think like that. They think, no, you have to do it this way. And then I learned more and more just casually.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I started teaching 3 years ago. The schools were going in and out of lockdowns because of COVID. And I started teaching on the day that they shut down the schools. So we started teaching online immediately. What I teach at college is construction. It's woodwork. It's tools.
Okay.
And how do you do that online?
Uh,
And so it was a lot. And I had one day
okay.
at the college where I got my laptop and I got my lanyard and my photo and, met people. And then I spent the next 2 months online. And I had to learn all of the computer systems
Okay.
online, teach online,
Struggle a
shadow the
lot.
other teachers online, everything. But it also meant I had the time while working from home to read through the profiles of the students, because the school starts in September. So by that time, they'd already been there for a couple of months. The previous teachers had written comments about behavior or monitoring different things. I had to specifically look up students with what they call here an EHCP, an education healthcare plan. So generally through school, students will get assessed and get this EHCP plan, which then ties to like support and funding and money and all of that. But it's generally ADHD and autism. And so I had to read about all of these different students that I had never seen or met, because there's a whole support team within the college of like, the student would like the tutor to know that they need this, or they need that, or they would prefer this, blah, blah, blah. And it was all these different adjustments, basically. And so from reading those, I'm sitting at home, spending a lot of time by myself, reading what these students need because they have been diagnosed with a need for those things. And I'm like, I do that. I need that. I do that. And so all of the things that they needed, I had developed naturally as coping strategies, I now know, as ways to deal with things. And I didn't even know I was dealing with those things. I didn't know that other people didn't, So from there, I went, TikTok started being used really heavily in the pandemic. And so I was watching a lot of content, and it started showing me a lot of ADHD content. So I started researching, and I went, oh, I'm scoring very high on all the self-assessment tests. Thankfully, it wasn't hard for me, but from the groups and things that I'm a part of, it can be really, really hard to convince your doctor that ADHD is real.
Okay.
It was about 4 months between getting referred and actually having the assessment.
How many consultations you had at first until you got the diagnosis of ADHD and autistic? How many consultations you had?
I got my 2 diagnoses separate. So in October of 2021 was when I got diagnosed with ADHD, and that was after the wait. I did a video assessment with the psychologist remotely. I had learnt that I could be on a wait list for years unless I went through this specific path, and that meant I could choose the psychologist who would do my assessment, right, and not just be put on the wait list. And so I went through the specific company, and they do your assessment via video. Before I actually did the assessment in that 4-month wait, I had to fill out, I didn't want to get diagnosed with the label of autism until I knew it would be helpful to have it and not damaging to have it to like my career, to all of that. Because the support that I got for ADHD was next to nothing.
Yeah, true.
So what's the point of putting a label on if I'm not actually going to help? Like I could just stay self-diagnosed and just, cope in my own ways.
Mental health support, it's really matter. I mean, like when we have the mental health, it doesn't mean we cannot work. We still have work, but in a different way. And I think everyone should be aware of that. I think one of your strength is you guys are creative. Correct me if I'm mistaken. You are super creative, and everyone doesn't have like the super creative as you are.
I think that's one thing that I need to clarify as well, because with the way that we speak about it and the terminology. So you've said, for example, mental health and mental illness and things like that. Technically, ADHD, autism, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, all of it, they are neurological developmental disorders.
True.
So it's not actually mental health related.
True.
The parts of mental health and mental illness that definitely come with it is my anxiety, is my depression, all of that. And I have that anxiety and I have that depression and I have the, trauma responses because having undiagnosed developmental issues is traumatic.
Yeah.
And
That's why.
you're dealing with a life, knowing how they are separate but also interlink is really important, I think, because I don't walk around work going, oh, I have a mental illness.
No.
I now walk around going, I have a disability. And it took a lot to actually be okay with telling myself that, yes, I am actually disabled. And I have to remind myself every day when I get overwhelmed or something happens and I'm like, oh, I can't do this. I'm like, oh, it's because my disability is disabling me. I'm like, it's not that I'm a bad person.
So that's why it's really important, right? So to us to take care of mental health, even the small thing.
Now that I'm teaching and I'm meeting different students, I strongly feel that the adjustments and accommodations that the neurodivergent students need, I won't just give that to one student that needs it. I will do it to the whole class because adjustments for neurodivergent people do not negatively affect neurotypical people. It makes everything more accessible for everybody.
The way you came up with the stigma, that was really incredible. I think it's not everyone can be really open, and you're not really open, but you taking care of other people around, especially your students too, and the way you support them and to make sure them is accessibility and have the support thing is really wonderful.
I think because I have, as far as I'm aware, always had anxiety, right?
Yes.
So I worry about everything. But equally, it also means that I feel sometimes like I can read the future because I can see how that one decision you make now has 30 different outcomes. And I can see the 30 different outcomes that each of those choices has. And I can see it as a big web.
Okay, we aware. Okay, so what next? So what do you really hope, what kind of support actually that we need?
So here in the UK, once you get diagnosed, good luck. The two options of support for ADHD in the UK are talking therapy, which is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy,
Right.
which does not work for ADHD people if it's available in your area, which in my area of the UK, it's not. So it wasn't even an option for me. So the other option was medication. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but since September, there has been an international shortage of ADHD medication. So my options for support are really little. And you have to navigate it yourself. There's no follow-up from the doctor to check how you are. There's no follow-up once you have your diagnosis. It's okay, you now have to figure it out yourself.
That's so sad. Sorry about that.
Thankfully, I have received support because I had to fight for it and I had to advocate for myself. And that is one of the hardest things to do in general, but especially when you have ADHD, which affects your executive functioning. So my ability to just do things, I can't.
So everyone can have the chance to get it. So listening your stories open my mind. It's in UK. Is ready to have the support, especially in Indonesia, especially for educated that you mentioned before. Every education institution they have counseling center, let's say, but just only focus on the student, right? How about the staff? How about the educator? That's the main point, right? The educator itself.
Even therapists have therapy.
Yeah.
Like,
Sometimes the psychologists need the counseling too because they are human too. Actually, that's
we
lovely.
need to process it and we don't talk about it. And especially like from my area of what I teach, which is construction trades, which is generally male dominated, and there's the whole stigma around men and feelings and
Yeah.
all of that. So some of my students with those like education healthcare plans that have followed them through school, that have clear needs,
Yeah.
do not associate with their diagnosis at
Yeah.
all because they don't want to be seen as different.
Yeah, true.
And so I'm like, how am I supposed to support you if you don't even acknowledge what you have?
True. Sad for